She was gone for 11 days. She told the hospital human resources department it was a family emergency in Atlanta. She told her landlord she would be out of town and asked that maintenance not enter her apartment while she was away. She told no one else anything. There was no one else to tell, which was something she had arranged deliberately and which had never felt like a cost until she stood at her kitchen counter at 5 in the morning with her bag by the door and her phone in her hand and understood that there was nobody she could call to say she was leaving. She called Dr. Fitch's office and left a message canceling their appointment. She did not explain. She put her phone in her bag. She took one more look at her apartment, the counter, the window, the empty space where the pothos had been, and she went out. The 11 days are not the story. That is important to understand. The 11 days are the part that belongs to the operational world, which has its own rules and its own accounting system, and Mara has spoken about them only in the most general terms in the recorded conversations on which this account is based. What happened, happened. It was resolved. Reyes, Callahan, and the remaining 2 members of the reconstituted team came through it. The question that Reyes had spent 3 years pulling a thread toward was answered, in the way that answers in that world are answered. Not cleanly, not in ways that satisfy in the way a solved equation satisfies, but in the way that things in the real world get resolved, which is messily, and at cost, and with the understanding that some things are as finished as they are ever going to get. What she will say about the 11 days is this: it was the thing I knew how to do. I did it. I came home. She says came home, in reference to Boise, which she did not notice until the author pointed it out. She was quiet for a moment after that. Then she said, "Yes, I suppose that's what it was." She flew back on a Wednesday. Economy, middle seat, a 3-hour flight during which she slept in the particular compressed way of someone who has trained themselves to extract rest from whatever window is available. The man in the window seat was watching a nature documentary on his phone without headphones, which she would normally have found irritating. She was too tired to find it irritating. She watched 30 seconds of it and fell asleep. She landed in Boise at 2:40 p.m. She took the shuttle to the parking structure. She got in her car. She sat there for a moment in the familiar concrete quiet of the second level, and she breathed. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, and the thing she felt was not what she had expected to feel. She had expected to feel the particular hollowness of return, the specific gravity of coming back to a life after leaving it, the adjustment period, the need to relearn the rhythms. She had felt it before, after deployments, after the months she had spent being someone she was not. What she felt instead, sitting in the parking structure, was closer to something she did not have a word for. She drove home. She unlocked her apartment. The keys felt right in her hand. The door opened the way it always opened. It stuck slightly at the top because the frame had expanded in the winter cold. You had to push once and let it settle before it would swing. She knew that. She had known it for 18 months. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. Her books, her single chair by the east window, the empty hook on the wall that still held the mark of the last hook someone had put there before her, in a life she knew nothing about. She put her bag down. She went to the kitchen. She stood at the counter, and she was aware, in a way she had not been before the 11 days, of every specific thing that was ordinary about this moment. The afternoon light coming through the window, the faint sound of the neighbor's television, the fact that she was standing in a kitchen that was hers, in a city she had chosen, in a life she had built one deliberate Tuesday at a time. She had been afraid, in the run-up to leaving, that going back would undo it, that stepping back into the old world, even briefly, would dissolve whatever she had built here the way water dissolves something that was always only held together by careful conditions. She had been afraid that she would come back, and the apartment would look like a container she had been keeping herself in, rather than a place she lived. It did not look like that. It looked like her apartment. She started the kettle. She was back at work the following Monday. She clocked in at 6:55, 5 minutes before her shift started, which was when she always clocked in. She changed into her scrubs. She put on her badge. She stopped at the nurse's station, and she looked at the board for the shift's patient census, and she was already orienting herself to the day's work when she heard footsteps and looked up. Dolores came around the corner carrying 2 cups of coffee. She held one out. Mara took it. They stood at the nurse's station for a moment. Dolores was looking at the board. Mara was looking at the board. Bay 3 came in late last night, Dolores said. Respiratory, 62. He's stable, but he's had a rough night. I'll see him first, Mara said. Dolores nodded once. She moved off toward the medication cart. She had not asked a single question. Later in the morning, during a gap between patients, Mara went to the break room and found her locker. She opened it. The pothos was on the top shelf. It was not droopy anymore. Someone, Dolores, obviously Dolores, had watered it and apparently moved it near the break room window for light at some point, because it had a new leaf coming in, pale green and slightly curled at the edge, just emerging. Mara stood there looking at it. She took it out. She set it on the break room table in the patch of morning light, and she stood there for a moment, looking at the new leaf, which was entirely unremarkable in the way of leaves everywhere, in the way of small growing things that do what they do without any particular drama. She went back to work. Bay 3 first. The man with the respiratory issue. He was 62, barrel-chested, a retired electrician from the name on his chart. His name was George. He had wire-rimmed glasses on the bedside table that he reached for the moment Mara introduced herself, the reflex of a man who likes to see the person he is talking to clearly. She handed them to him. He put them on. Better, he said. How are you feeling? Like I breathed wrong for about 12 hours, he said. You kind of did, she said. He liked that. She could see him decide to like her, which was the way some patients decided things. Quickly, on the basis of a single honest sentence, committing to trust with the directness of someone who has been alive long enough to know it is the faster option. She worked through his assessment. She asked the right questions. She listened to the answers. All of them, including the ones that were not technically relevant to his respiratory status but were relevant to the fact that he was a human being who had had a difficult night and was in a strange place and needed to feel that someone was paying attention. She was paying attention. That was the thing she had brought back from everything she had ever done. The absolute, non-negotiable, total payment of attention to the person in front of her. In other contexts, it had meant something different. Here it meant this: a 62-year-old man with wire-rimmed glasses who felt seen in a hospital bay on a Monday morning. She moved through the rest of the day the way she moved through days at St. Agatha's. One patient at a time, one decision at a time, the full and serious application of everything she knew to the specific problem of the specific person in front of her. She did not think about the 11 days. She did not think about Reyes, who had been discharged 3 days before her return to a location, and a recovery process she had no need to know about. She did not think about Callahan or Colonel D, or the question that had been answered. She thought about her patients. She thought about the man in Bay 3 and his glasses. She thought about the young mother in Bay 7, who was scared in the way first-time mothers are scared in an ER, and who needed someone to be calm next to her. She thought about the orthopedic case in Bay 1, and the specific angle of a secondary complication that Dr. Crane had missed in the initial assessment, which she flagged quietly and without ceremony, and which he caught and corrected with the easy acknowledgement of someone who had stopped being bothered by being caught missing something by Mara Osei, approximately 3 months into her tenure. At the end of the shift, she changed out of her scrubs. She picked up the pothos from the break room table. She carried it out through the corridors of St. Agatha's, past the broken vending machine on the 2nd floor, past the elevator bank with the button that stuck on the 4th floor and required a specific pressing technique she had explained to Sophie twice, past the nurse's station, where the next shift was already settling in. She drove home. She put the pothos back on the kitchen counter. She made dinner, something real, from ingredients, because she had decided early in her time in Boise that she was going to cook actual meals as a form of being present in her own life, a commitment she maintained with the same consistency she brought to everything else. She ate at her counter, standing, which she knew was not the recommended approach, but which felt right in the way that some technically suboptimal things feel right. She did the dishes. She sat in her chair by the east window. It was dark outside. Boise at night has a particular quality to its darkness. Not the complete dark of rural places or the never quite dark of big cities, but something in between, a managed dimness punctuated by traffic lights and the glow of other windows. She could see a family in the building across the way, moving through their kitchen. She was not watching them specifically. They were just present in her field of vision, a domestic pattern of motion behind glass, something ordinary happening in the ordinary way. She sat with it. She had survived things that most people do not know exist to survive. She had made decisions under conditions that have no civilian equivalent. She had loved people and lost them in the way that you lose someone, when the loss is operational and irreversible, and surrounded by paperwork that does not have room for the full weight of the thing. She was sitting in a chair in Boise, Idaho, watching strangers move around their kitchen. She understood exactly where she wanted to be. That was a new thing. Not the place. She had wanted to be here before. She had built this deliberately. But the wanting, before, had been a decision, a committed act of will, something she sustained by choosing it again every morning. Tonight it was not that. Tonight it was something that did not need choosing because it was simply true. She sat with that for a while. She thought about Torres. She thought about him in the way she had learned to think about him, not as a wound to press on or avoid, but as a person, a specific man, who made terrible coffee and kept his daughter's drawings in his jacket pocket, and who had been funny and careful and genuinely good at what he did, and who was gone, and who she had known. She kept him there, not in a box, just kept him. She thought about Marcus Reyes in a recovery room, too pale, one corner of his mouth not quite managing a smile, saying fair in the particular tone of a man who has just been told an accurate thing about himself. She thought about Pete Callahan watching rooms. She thought about the question that had been answered. She did not regret going. She did not want to go back. Both things sat in her at the same time, without canceling each other out, which she was beginning to understand was just how most important things work. She went to bed at 10 o'clock. She was asleep by 10:15. She did not leave the light on. In November, several months after all of this, she was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria with a colleague, a nurse named Paul who had started 2 months before, and who was still in the phase of needing to talk through every difficult case as a way of processing it. Mara did not mind this. She listened well. She had a talent for asking the one question that helped someone find the answer they were already holding. They were talking, and at some point the conversation shifted, and Paul said something that made an observation about nursing as a second career. And he said, "Did you always know this was what you wanted to do?" Mara thought about it honestly, which was the only way she knew how to think about anything. "No," she said. "I knew I wanted to be useful. I knew I wanted to do something that mattered. It took a while to figure out that this was what that looked like for me." Paul nodded, satisfied with this. Mara picked up her coffee. "I think," Paul started, and then stopped, because a code blue call came over the intercom, and they were both already moving, trays abandoned, coffee left, walking fast through the corridor toward the sound. She was in Bay 5 before the call finished. Her gloves were on. Her eyes were already reading the room. She was where she needed to be. She was not afraid. She was, if such a word can hold the full, complicated, specific weight of what she had built and survived, and returned to, and kept. She was home.